Shall we start with light?
Yes.
Is this the first time you light, like actual light?
As far as I can remember, yes, it's the first time. I mean, basically, the whole thing started from just general readings around the position of women in Javanese society, which went on a tangent into readings about power in Javanese society because of the lack of power that women have, even though they're economically dominant. And then that went on to readings about the interpretation of women as Wayang characters. And that went on to another tangent about the interpretation of goddess figures in Wayang mythology. And once I kind of fell upon a particular goddess figure in Wayang mythology, I started reading more about that and basically came up with the most interesting part, which was the embodiment of paradoxes in one being. And not a binary form of a paradox, like one thing against the other, but a combination of many elements inside one being. And one of those elements was light.
Who was she? Like, who was this character?
That was goddess Durga, referred to in some of the readings as the cult of Batari Durga. So light was a primary element in her expression, apart from the other expressions of her personality, which was vengefulness, anger, causing destruction and pestilence, but at the same time, she nurtures and protects and guides. So it's the combination of a whole bunch of elements that contradict each other, and in the middle of all those contradictions was the element of light.
So she's the hot element.
She's panas, yes.
She's hot.
She's hot. And then I was experimenting with some small drawings in my studio, which I had no intention of exhibiting. I was just messing around with something new in my studio, something other than the laborious charcoal on paper. And I wanted to introduce light into the drawings and introduce an element of color into the drawings. So I started to experiment with gold leaf and copper leaf and see how that went. Yeah, that's where light came into the drawings, really.
So those are when you said you were experimenting, messing around with the drawings in your studio, basically you were using charcoal.
I was using charcoal on paper, similar to what I've done in the last 10 to 15 years. But I wanted to do it in a way that wasn't labor intensive. And actually, I wanted to try to do something that I could actually enjoy and be spontaneous with.
That's why you never thought of exhibiting
Yes.
all these playful drawings.
Yeah. It never occurred to me to exhibit the work because I thought that making good work meant labor, meant grinding, meant finding things difficult. I thought all the good stuff came out of the labor, but actually in this process I realized it was okay to be light, not only in kind of a light source, but light in terms of touch on the drawing.
There is another labor behind that lightness of drawings, I think, which was the sort of research that you were talking about.
Yes.
Before. I mean, there are these information, knowledge, opinions that sort of, in a way, found its way to the spontaneous drawings.
Idea of labor, I have baggage when it comes to the labor of drawing, but I also have intellectual baggage. I feel that it's necessary for me to be labor academically in order for a project to work. That's why I lean on the texts Ben Anderson, Peter Carey, other references. I lean on those texts. They are a crutch for me. And that's laborious too, actually.
That was where I was going at.
Yeah.
That's laborious too. And initially I felt like it's a separate sort of box in your mind, that there's that part and then there's the work making part.
Yeah, most definitely it's a separate box. And I always thought, I have for the most part in the last 12 or 13 years started with academic texts as a foundation for projects.
I want to go back to that, but we should finish the light part first. We
Yeah.
should go back to the light part. There was Durga that interests you. She's a hot element. I assume she's also hot.
She's hot.
Then you're attracted to the light part of her. Then it found a way to your drawing
Yes.
by the necessity of using color,
Yes.
by the urge to use color in your drawing.
Yeah, by the urge to use something else, really.
That's not charcoal. That's not black and
charcoal.
white.
Yes. The urge to try and introduce a new element into the work.
When you thought about color, did you think of other charcoal-like materials?
No.
Or did you immediately think gold leaf, copper leaf, like a different element to introduce to your drawing?
I thought the interpretation of Durga's light was best done with the gold and copper leaf.
So it's a completely different element than your drawing in general, because in general it's charcoal.
Previously and generally it's been charcoal on paper, collage, and this work there is no collage really. It's just horizon line, a depiction of space, and the copper and gold leaf. Now I think, why did I depict the horizon line and why was I thinking of landscapes? Fundamentally, I knew I was embarking on a sculpture project, and the horizon line is a depiction of space. Sculpture is an articulation of space. It's not the object, it's the space that it lives in and the space that it creates.
I think this is why light element in your work also really fascinates me, because not only you are making sculptures that are not meant to be on pedestal,
Yes.
but they are also, they have light in them.
Yeah.
So they create surprises, which is how I kept coming back to the surprise element,
Yeah.
because we saw everything in parts. We saw all the work in parts. We knew that there would be light here, but what does it mean if we
Yeah.
have light? We talked about the different sort of lamps or source of light that we could use in the work,
Yeah.
but we never knew what they would look like.
No, I mean that's the privilege of having a studio smaller than the work you make. I mean fundamentally we've put together the work in the space, and I had no idea what the work was going to look like before I installed it, because I made all the parts separately. I'm equally surprised.
And it's not just the work itself, like how all these elements meet in as an object, but also like what you were saying about sculpture, how we now put it in space, and now we see how it becomes present in space and how it creates shadows.
Yes.
Is another element.
Well, the shadows were your element. I mean, it was great. Never occurred to me until you lit it in a particular way, but I had light emanating from the work, and you lit the space to create shadow. So combined, I mean, we both introduced elements of light to the show, really.
Because without the added light, you can't see the work, so it's somewhat necessary.
Yeah, so it's all lit in one way or another.
And there was this surprise when we installed the harvest, that we couldn't see it's blue.
Yeah.
There was that surprise, like,
Yeah.
wow, it was so blue in the studio, and
Yes.
now I was so afraid that it would be like the alien in the whole constellation in the show.
Okay.
But once it's hanged, we were like, where's the blue?
Yeah,
The blue is gone.
The blue's gone.
We need to show that it's blue. Surprise element is really nice, I think. We couldn't have designed the light.
No, we basically designed it on the spot, really. Light was always a consistent element in the design of the sculpture from the very beginning. I mean, my introduction of brass was intended to throw light into solid 3 dimensions. I mean, the brass was supposed to kind of come from that idea of melting a solid form through fire and creating a 3-dimensional object, and it was supposed to shine so incredibly in my mind as an element of light as well. But of course, once we went through the casting process and we discovered imperfections in the brass casting, the light element in the casting disappeared, and I opted to cover it with a patina.
It was meant also to sort of emanate light.
Yes, it was definitely meant to create a kind of spectacularly lit kind of feeling, but it just didn't turn out that way. I mean, we can, go on and on about the problems of casting in Jogja, but fundamentally the brass patina came out of trying to fix problems. And then it just went into another direction. But the brass was intended to be light. So for this show, I made 3 pieces, trying to get past the problems of casting brass in Jogja, but not quite succeeding. And then opting for the green patina to introduce color into the show. And also to cover up mistakes.
There is this, in Dewi we see a lot of materials exposed as is.
Yes.
The steel sling that we used to hang, the cables.
Yeah.
And the steel sling that you use for the whip. Mm-hmm. We see materials as is.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit more about that?
The whip is a stainless steel sling made into a braid. I mean, fundamentally, the material is supposed to speak for itself. In order to create a whip out of a braid made of steel, it kind of combines the materiality of the stainless steel sling into something feminine, but also it borrows from a very fixed idea of everybody's experience of a stainless steel sling. It's industrial, it's already used in other contexts. So I've borrowed the context in order to create something female in the braid, and combining those 2 elements to create something that's threatening, which is a whip.
There was a moment where we talked about labor, but then we left it at that.
Yeah.
And this whip made of stainless steel sling that you braid.
Yes.
To make it look like an actual hair braid.
Yeah.
It goes smaller towards the end.
Yes, that's right.
And but steel slings are not hairs.
That's right.
So
yes, this was the 3rd attempt at creating this braid. The labor was actually the financial cost that went into trying to make it 3 times with 2 different technical teams. Yeah, I paid a lot of money to finally get it right, but I had to get it right.
Is that part of the sort of challenging the material into becoming feminine?
Well, it was part of somebody who hadn't worked with sculpture in 30 over years, having a bright idea and then having to bring it into 3-dimensional life, really. I mean, I had a great idea, I thought, but I had to realize it in a way that was clear for me. So it took several tries to get it right.
So the cost is actually experiment cost.
If you come to sculpture after 20 years of making drawings, you're going to have to pay, not just for the production costs, but for the cost of attempting something completely new. And that's what I did. I experimented, not only with the stainless steel sling, but also with the buffalo hide that covers the light.
Did you, from early on, did you decide buffalo hide, or were you thinking of other skins?
I decided quite early on the buffalo hide because it did have a relationship with Durga and the mythology of her fighting a buffalo. But basically, the other thing I realized about materials in making sculpture was that you really had to work with what's available. I really had to work with what was available to me. So I had all these plans, you know, glass blowing lah, inilah, itulah, and it all fell flat into realizing that I had to work with what was available locally.
Yeah, true. I remember that you were looking for like glass blowing studios in Bali.
Yeah. And that all fell by the wayside because of COVID also. And the glass blowing places were shut. But yeah, I mean, I realized that I really had to work with what was available, and the buffalo hide is a beautiful material made, used to make wayang kulit. The difference was it's just never been stretched out into a three-dimensional form. That is also something that we as a team experimented with until we got it right.
So you never tried with other skins?
No. I really believed, actually, that it would work. I had tried several times with smaller pieces, and it worked. And I really believed I could make it work with larger pieces. I just had to find the right way and the right people to help me. Yeah.
You worked with it in smaller pieces?
Yes.
With the buffalo hide. So what else is new in this constellation?
Goat skin.
Goat skin.
The goat skin is the element in the exhibition that talks about nurturing, and the title of the work also refers to my son. So it all kind of came together with the goat skin being a form of protection. I mean, Lanang's second name is Pijar. Pijar also refers to light. The cocoon is a form that refers to something that is still in its embryonic stage, and I wanted to cover the cocoon form with goat skin as a form of protection, but I realized that in the way that I did cover it was kind of emblematic of the way that I cover my son. I cannot smother him completely. I can only cover him in parts so that he can shine a little bit.
He will slowly grow out of you.
Yes, he will slowly grow out of me. I mean, I realized very early on in his life. So the first time I left Lanang alone with other people was when he was 10 weeks old, when I went to pick Ari up at the airport. And I realized as I was waiting for Ari and having that space to myself for the first time in 10 weeks since he was born, was that in order to love him as much as I do, I can't be around him all the time. There needed to be space between me and him in order to sustain that level of affection and love. There needed to be pockets of time that I could have to myself. And that made me, at the time, made me really sad for him. Because I remember needing to cling to my own mother all the time when I was a kid, and of course I couldn't do that. And that made me sad then, and it made me sad to realize that as a mother, really.
What's the element on top of Lanang Pijar? There's a cocoon.
Yeah, there's
that
a
has
cocoon.
Light. It's resin.
Yeah.
It has light in it. You cover it with the goat hide.
Yes. Well, all the sculptures have a similar element of being a top part and a bottom part. The top for 3 of the works being light, a light form, and the bottom part being something else. But specifically for Lanang Pijar, the top element I see as me, I suppose, as the person who's carrying him and protecting him and nurturing him.
It's made out of brass,
Yes.
and it doesn't have a quote-unquote source form.
No, it doesn't have a source form. It has horns. The horn element is reflected a couple of times in the show. To be horned is to be kind of ferociously angry lah. Somebody did refer to the Minang women.
Because of the style.
Yeah. So it does have a female reference in Southeast Asian context. It didn't start there for me. It kind of just came out of a series of drawings in my studio.
Maybe now is the time to go back to the drawings.
Yeah.
When you started with the drawings that we now have in the show, you said that it wasn't meant to be exhibited. It was. There were several terms that went back and forth in our conversation. It was developmental drawing. Now it's called study.
Yeah.
And then there was also a conversation about free hand drawing.
Yeah.
Like we also talked about sketch, like these being the sketches of the sculptures.
Yeah.
But clearly it's not.
Yeah.
It's right now. It looks like it's the environment in which all these sculptures came from.
Yeah.
That they are all from the same world. How did these forms came into your drawings?
I wanted to introduce the idea of talisman because I want to use the word witchcraft. Witchcraft is so barat, but witchcraft is a big element in the show, actually.
Yes. What's the Bahasa version of it?
Well, I was thinking that the Bahasa version of it is so male. I mean, we understand dukun as a male realm.
It depends on where we use it. Like, if you are going to give birth, you also call it dukun, and it's not male.
Okay. I mean, what I learned about exhibiting at Stovia at Jakarta Biennale was that the world of dukun and the world of traditional medicine were all melding into one realm. And the element of what word shall we use for this?
Witchcraft, yeah.
Because basically all the words have been colonized.
Yes.
By patriarchy.
That's not a problem, that's just reality. Patriarchy is not a problem, it's reality.
So all the heads were supposed to introduce an element of a talisman or a jimat.
They're the same, no?
Yes.
Talisman and jimat.
Yes,
Yeah.
talisman and jimat.
No, we should just use witchcraft. We should claim it back.
An element of witchcraft into the entire show. Yes, it's definitely there. Most definitely there.
So the forms that came into the drawings, they're the witchcraft elements.
Talisman elements.
Talisman elements.
Talisman elements which come from witchcraft.
So I mean, some of them you know what they are. Or when it becomes a sculpture, you then know what they are.
Yes.
But some are, I don't know, how do we put this? Sourceless, like.
Yeah, they're sourced from my mind. Basically, it's been a consistent problem throughout this entire process of creating Dewi is that what are the heads of the sculpture? What are they? Where do they come from? What do they mean?
Why do they have to be heads?
Why do they have to be
asking
heads?
you that. Like,
yeah, it definitely refers to the word talisman, and talisman actually refers to witchcraft.
Okay, we're good with the drawings. We're good with the kulit and the steel and the brass. Where do we go now?
The balls.
The balls. The balls, yes. The blue, actually. The blue balls.
The blue balls.
The blue balls. It has a nice title. The studio title of things are always amazing. I think.
The studio titles are always different from the actual titles.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it always shows, quote unquote, who's in charge. Like, because usually it's the names that the people are working use instead of the artist sort of name. So.
Yeah. I mean, titles are kind of always repackaged. Is about the process of rebranding the work after you've made it. But in the studio, you're making balls. You refer to the work as the balls work. Yeah, that's what I did for the balls.
What are they made of?
Resin, because I couldn't make them in glass.
Yeah.
I wanted the glass to represent a fragility of the male genitalia, but all I could come up with was resin balls.
That was the plan for the glass.
Yes,
Yeah.
the glass was supposed to be fragile glass balls, collected by the goddess in her efforts to seek revenge throughout the universe.
There is a really nice position of Durga in all this. Like,
Yeah.
it started from there, and then it intermingled with your life, everything else around you, but it still somehow comes back to her.
Yes, it does come back to her, but it's a reflection of me, my experiences. I relate to her very much.
What about I mean, I know this is a thing in sculpture world to sort of put an emphasis on the materials.
Yes.
Which is why somehow everything is sort of bare, like you can see them.
Yes.
But you are, in a way, highlighting that by allowing us to see the wires that you're working on.
Yeah.
Like there's like an attempt to show people how it's being done.
Yes. Well, it's something that I learned from working with you also, to kind of let the materials speak for themselves. Like Lanang Pijar was going to be a completely different kind of work until you came into the studio and said, this looks nice though, just the way it is. So in that sense, Lanang Pijar became a lot more kind of relaxed and focused more on the materials rather than carefully kind of gluing everything together. I'm not interested in creating a facade in sculpture. I'm interested in letting this material speak for themselves, with the exception of the harvest, where the balls are actually resin. And resin is not a material that signals anything.
It's like a placeholder material.
Yeah.
No? Placeholder for ideas, for possibilities.
I mean, the only thing the harvest speaks of is the form, and the material doesn't really come into it. I did use resin for Lanang Pijar, but
you let the resin be.
Yeah, but I created the resin as a carrier of light, as a receptacle of light. Yeah. So actually, in the case of Lanang Pijar, the resin works as a receptacle of light. So the material is
what it is.
It's what it is.
I was for a while thinking like, why didn't you use the goat hide or the buffalo hide, for example? Because in a way, with light, they have similar vibes.
Yeah.
But there was no necessity, I think, for it to be buffalo hide.
Well,
did you ever think about that?
I wanted the form of the cocoon, and the form came first. And actually, I made that really early on. I made the cocoon really early on, before I made the buffalo hide heads. But I knew that the buffalo hide had to work as a talisman element.
Ah.
as a receptacle of light, as the heads.
Ah, so the balls in the harvest is the only thing that you're hiding.
I am kind of hiding them under thick blue paint. But harvest has a too referential to fertility, and actually that work is supposed to be anti-fertility.
It would really be something else if it's glass, I think.
I think it would be. Would be nice to have gone there, but it was just so impossible, and the possibility was so expensive.
Where did we find Dewi? Or who's Dewi now?
Dewi is energy in the show. It's the potential to move from 15 years of making drawing into suddenly making a show of sculpture. It's the potential of creating something completely new, and importantly creating something that I really wanted to do for some time.
Dewi is someone else for me.
Who is it?
Dewi is possibility. It's a possibility, and it's a thing that allows other possibilities. Like to work together, to do things together, to fail at several attempts, and to never try to define it. Actually, we agreed on the title and we never went back at it. But it will be everyone's first question. So what is Dewi? Who is Dewi? Which one is Dewi? It will be everyone's first question. That's why I thought about who's Dewi. Dewi is...
Isn't Dewi going through the process of starting from absolutely nothing and coming up with this? Starting from zero in terms of sculptural development and coming up with 5 works.
It's a nice way to define it. I'm figuring out who Dewi is for me. But I like the process of figuring it out. I like her because she's not definite.
Yes.
I also like her because she's common. Like no one, at least here, no one feels threatened when you hear someone's name is Dewi. So I like her because of that. She could be that kind of surprise that you think, oh, it's just another Dewi, but oops. That's where I am at with who Dewi is.
Dewi is also community. I mean, you never come up with a show like this alone, really. There's family, there's teams, there's curators, there's Rachel's, there's documentation.
There's Handi.
There's Handi.
That becomes Jendela. That becomes the whole complex.
It's all community, really. I mean, the thing about the art world is that they label and brand artists individually. But artists come from communities. And artists come from places and specific times as well.
And they have neighbors.
They have neighbors. They have teams, solid, strong teams.
That's a nice place to end it, but